Well, we're here with Fred and Eric, and we're going to discuss or find out what they know about the 10 plagues. It's something that should be read at Pesach. What should we be reading at Pesach to tell the full story? Go!
What do you know about the 10 plagues, Fred?
Well, I recall hearing the story when I was a child.
Okay, what are the 10 plagues? What are the features of those 10 things that happened? How many can you list?
How many can I list? I knew you were going to ask me an embarrassing question.
What's one?
Well, let's
Name
see.
one.
All the waters were turned to blood,
Okay,
and then I think frogs
okay.
came forth, and gnats, and flies. Cattle died. Let's see, there was, I'm probably going to miss a few here, but there was hail. There was darkness.
Bloody waters.
Yeah, we started with the bloody waters. There were the locusts.
So why is Yahweh into bugs? There's an interesting verse here. Just for what it's worth, this whole story begins in Exodus 7. The first plague is in chapter 7, it says verse 17. So says Yahweh, through this shall you know that I am Yod-He Vav-He, Yahweh. Behold, with the staff that is in my hand, I shall strike the waters that are in the river, and they shall change to blood. Okay, that's the beginning of the 10 plagues. Okay, so you figure, okay, by this they will know that I am Yahweh. Why did he pick that as a sign, a symbol? Okay, so the waters turn to blood. How does that mean that he is Yahweh? What's the connection? I mean, I could say, you know, that sailing ship that's supposed to be in the water is going to fly. I mean, how does that prove anything? I mean, this seems to be so abstract, so disconnected, that all you can say is, well, there was a story of a bunch of weird stuff. Does that mean he's Yod-He Vav-He? I mean, where's the interesting other part that I want to bring out is in Exodus 9,
Well,
verse 16.
what was Yahusha's first miracle?
Excuse me?
What was Yahusha's first miracle?
Being born of a virgin.
Oh, that was pretty awesome too.
You
But
blew it.
but wasn't it? Yeah, he turned the water into wine.
Well, being born of a virgin, that's a pretty good trick.
It is, I know, but feeding into this story.
Oh, okay. Listen to this. Exodus 9, verse 16. This is Yod-He Vav-He speaking. However, for this have I let you endure. You have to pick up the story. This is the 9th plague, and he's just been hammering away at Pharaoh for a reason. He's going to tell you the reason. In order to show you my strength, and so that my name may be declared throughout the world. Is his name declared throughout the world? No. You're not allowed to say it. His name was changed 7,000 times, nearly, in the King James, and in the Septuagint, changed it to Adonai, Hashem, the Lord. His name, whether it's Yod-He Vav-He or Aleph-He Yod-He, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, his name has been eradicated.
In the Jewish tradition, you're not to speak it.
You better not. There's a death curse.
Yes, yes.
Gosh. One other little matter, there's a state right in the middle of the USA. It's spelled I-O-W-A, Iowa. What do you think of when you think of Iowa? What do you think of?
Yahuwah.
The Iowa caucus.
The Iowa caucus?
The Iowa caucus.
Is that where the Trump won or something? Or what was
It's
that?
one of the first indicators of which way an election might go.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I didn't know. What is their state team? Is it the Buckeyes, the Cornhuskers?
Well, you're talking to a non-sports fan, so
I'm just saying, it's like, okay, you
I
hear
think
the word.
of cornfields, flat
It
terrain.
might be the Nebraska Cornhuskers, I'm not
Okay.
sure. Oops, sorry to offend anybody there. But the point is,
I'm sure it's a
You
beautiful state.
you see the word I-O-W-A, and it's like, doesn't ring any bells. I believe there was an Indian tribe by the name of the Kiowa, so it's in English letters K-I-O-W-A. But where did they get that name? I don't know. Interestingly enough, the phonetic sound of the word I-O-W-A, if you tried to write that in Hebrew letters, it would be just like Yod-He-Vav-He, Yahweh. And if you put a letter K or the Kaf in front of it, it would be like Yahweh. Meaning, we were called, Yeshua said, follow me, which means we're supposed to be just like him. Abraham was told, be ye perfect. We were told, be perfect, even as Elohim is perfect. And that's supposed to be our goal, our endeavor. We're supposed to be tracking on that. So I have no idea what the Kiowa or Kiowa Indian name meant, but I could say if I was to transpose the word Kiowa into Hebrew, it's actually what we were commanded to do, to be like Yahweh.
Beautiful picture.
Well, but do you see that when you hear the name Iowa as the heartland of the United States?
No one thinks of that.
No one thinks of that. So in Exodus 9 verse 16, where Yod-He-Vav-He, that's the spelling of the 4 letters, that's not his name, that's the spelling of his name. When he said, okay, I'm going to do these 10 plagues so that, well, here's what it really says. Lamed mem ayin nun, le ma'an, sefer shemi bakal haaretz. So that sefer, that's connecting the dots, that's a word for book or scroll, or like making a fence line, you're putting this post and you're connecting them together, like forming constellations. It's telling a story. It's giving shape to hair. A barber is a sefer. A scribe is a sofer. It's where we get the word super, like Superman and soprano. It's the highest and best of all pursuits. Sefer Shemi is my name. Bakal is in all or through all. Haaretz, the earth. So he said he's doing this so that his name might be strung together. If you went on a vacation and you picked up little trinkets of souvenirs and you strung them together on a bracelet, you know, what they call a charm bracelet, and you go, oh wow, this reminds me, every one of these stops we made, what a great vacation. Or maybe your child, as they grow up through the years, you get a little token and say, hey, this is the token of your child. So in fact, this great room we're in, what is that? What is that? What is that? And that and that. This is a story of your heritage, your life. This is severing the Buis family right here. Well, he gave these 10 plagues for exactly that reason. That's what it means to sever his Shem throughout or unto everyone on the planet. And yet, all we know is, well, he did something with a bunch of bugs and reptiles. There were some frogs thrown in. We failed. Or he failed. He's the guy that designed this thing. So if he thought that that was the best way to sever his Shem throughout all the world, apparently it didn't work. Or did it? Maybe there's another way to read this. In Ivrit, in the original language. Maybe there's something that tells us about him that because we've been reading English based on Latin, based on Greek, we've just kind of polluted it, diluted it, missed it, tripped over it, lost it. Who knows, who cares? I think that's where we've ended up. What were you going to say?
Well, we were supposed to be telling this story for the last 2,000 years, and by eliminating his name and changing the language 4 times, we have failed. We have failed. It was our job to tell this story to our children, our children's children, and it didn't happen. It got polluted, just as you said.
There's a certain commandment at the Moed, the appointed time of Pesach. That appointed time is the evening, the later hours of the 14th day of the first month in the springtime. That's the appointed time designated by Yod-He-Vav-He. And if we did regard that, his name, his Shem, his reputation would be retained. But we call it a Jewish holiday. We call it Easter, which is the word Ishtar and Ashtoreth, which name he said he hates. It's the Middle Eastern Canaanite fertility goddess.
Don't even let it cross your lips.
I don't even say the name, is what he said. Well, the word name is not just the soundbite, the phonetics of their title, their, the name Stu or George or Bob or whatever it might be. The word Shem also means fame, renown, and reputation. So it's elaborating on the story. When I went to a Baptist high school down in Los Angeles, we learned the names and the stories of the Greek and Roman deities, gods and goddesses, Zeus and Thor and all these different,
No kidding.
the things that the planets are named after. But I never recall hearing about the Moedim of Yahuwah, Yodevave. Never remember hearing anything about the spelling of his name or his memory. I don't know that, up until just a few years ago, I didn't even know that there was such a thing called Moedim, appointed times, festivals. Those Jews have some crazy holidays. Well, they just want time off or something, I don't know, paid holiday. It's a different culture from the other side of the planet. I don't know I had no clue that it was, the word moed, as we've discussed before, means witness and testimony, and with the little letter mem in front of the ayin dalet, it means these are the objects, the occasions, the designated items which will do the job of bearing witness and testimony of who I am.
So important that in Genesis 1 he said, he put the sun, the moon in place to tell us when his Moedim would be.
So on day 4 of Genesis 1, the first week of the creation of the universe,
It was on his mind.
It was on his mind, and he correlated the timing and the ebb and flow and the processing like a big clockwork of the entire universe fit to these Moedim. And that Baptist high school and grade school and Presbyterian church couldn't see fit to even mention it. Why?
My Adventist tradition ignored it as well, and we claimed to take these words very seriously. Never heard the word Moedim, knew nothing about
Right
this
past.
feast, just gone.
Gone. So the purpose of making a video such as this is to be engaged in the activity proactively, not waiting for someone else, but to restore the consideration, to value the things that he said were most valuable, to treasure the only greatest treasure, not only the greatest, but the only treasure really in all the world, is his stuff. Because he said, seek ye first the kingdom of Elohim and his righteousness, and everything else will be added to you. So the pursuit of any other is folly in comparison to the regard of what he said.
Absolutely.
That's why we're making these videos. It's not the blah, 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 make more things, have people... It's to facilitate everybody taking 5 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, to ponder Yahuwah's stuff. That's his Shem. His name, his fame, his reputation, the things that he designed to give witness and testimony about him, his commandments, his instructions. It's the occupation of all his concerns. His concerns becoming our concerns is literally what the word ayin nun hey means, which is translated fast or affliction for the day of Yom Kippur. It doesn't necessarily mean fast. It means burden yourself in response to what he said should be our concerns. And so he said, okay, you said to make it our concerns, we'll make it your concerns. Now we've accomplished the purpose of Yom Kippur, which is to listen and do as he said. And people say, well, that means don't eat and don't drink and to fast. And it's like, well, that's one little element, but it's not the meaning of the word at the surface level. The point is, for us to sit here and talk, is to provide, it's like going on a train ride. Why? Well, you might have to get to that destination, but we took a little train ride a few months ago down at the coast, and all they did, a little steam engine, all they did was drive us out to the forest, in the middle of the woods, sit there for a few minutes to enjoy being there, and then drove us back. It was just for the fun of being on the train, just to see out in the open car, and it was to hear the engine and the smells. Mm-hmm. That's what these videos are trying to be. Just to provide the little excursion into these words, to see things you might never see, If you don't have the time to search these out, you don't have the dictionary, you don't have the Torah, you don't read the language, we're just trying to give you just a little experience of what it means to appreciate, to see into the words, the letters that he actually, I believe, Yahuwah himself invented the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, put together the words, constructed the language, and handed it not only to Adam, but to Moshe. And actually, as we talked about at Sukkot, the word bush, Hesna, He, Samik Nun, He, as a way of orchestrating the design of the orthography, the shape of the letters, and brought that into human consciousness back in about 1447 or so BC, Mount Sinai. That's a whole other story. But what I'm saying is that this is his stuff. This language is what he did for his own sake, for our sake, to regard his treasured matters. So for us to not know exactly what the plague, he did actually pretty good on that checklist of plagues for being called on cold. But so this whole study that I've been doing is just looking at the words in Hebrew, just looking at the words. And as we've shown people before, it's just writing down, it's writing down the words and looking in the dictionary and looking at each letter and trying to figure out, what did he say? What did that mean? How do we interpret this? So, Exodus 9, verses 14 to 16. This is spoken just before the 7th plague. This is what I have written down here, and this isn't, not before the 9th plague, I guess it's the 7th plague. Anyway, listen, this is just something I translated from these couple verses. So it is, as the bell tolls, at each striking 10 rounds, I let loose my arsenal, wasting epidemic. You're surrounded, you're vulnerable. Everything that matters to you, everything you care about, every beat of your heart is in my grip. And your servants who worship you, and your people who pray to you, looking to you, the disfigurement that is about to happen is to make known. Now this is Yahuwah speaking to Pharaoh through Moshe. And he's telling us what's about to happen and why. There ain't nobody who can match step with me in all the earth. Now here we go. I extend my hand, just consent. Truly, it's at your signal, Pharaoh, your call. You and your people have concocted falsehood, fabricated lies, and have annihilated the potential of the earth, concealing more than any on earth. So you and your people likewise, on account of this, your persistence, for you to see yourself on exhibition, will be annihilated more than any on earth. But what if, for the sake of this, you recognize transgression, and you regard my potential, heed my warning, in which case, if you are interested, if you get it, Sefer my Shem throughout all the earth. Now, the way I read this, Yahweh was giving Pharaoh an opportunity before it was too late. Don't you see what's happening? You can call this off. Just recognize who I am and tell the world instead of telling the world the opposite. And Pharaoh says, who is Yahweh that I should regard him? And it's like, okay, you need to know. Here's another one. And so interesting thing.
You're going to toss him some clues who he is.
And he chose these 10 things. And so what we want to analyze here with this little video is to say, we can look at it and say, well, he turned the river to blood. There was frogs, there was lice, there was flies, there was grasshoppers, there was... But why did he pick those things? Why? What does that mean? It wasn't just a matter of a bunch of bugs and frogs. There was a reason behind every one. And the reason was so that his name could be sephared. That you take these 10 things and you string them together like a bracelet chain. You hold them as objects of, ooh, boy, you remember this? Oh, wow, that... You know, you look at that rifle with that bayonet from World War I there on the wall and you go, man, there was a guy that was 19 years old that was at the peak of his strength at that end, and there was another guy at this end. Who's going to win? I mean, there's something, it's like, gosh, really, that's the best we can do on this planet? The point is, the same way that we look at objects and fit together this consciousness, this understanding, we put together this story, this scenario. It's almost like staging this film based on, or a book based on chapters, based on scenes, and that's what he's giving us. So what I did is I went back, like in this 1/7 plague, I looked at 14, 15, 16, 3 verses of Exodus 9. Starts in Exodus 7, but I just looked at like part of a sentence or one sentence per plague and tried to find the key line, like that first line that I read earlier, and wrote it down and translated, analyzed, tried to figure out what is in this verse. Now the interesting thing is this. There's 10 plagues, but he did one, what you might call an intro or a precursor, where he told Moshe, go talk to Pharaoh and take your stick, throw it down, and it turned into a tanin, which might have been something like a crocodile. They say it was a serpent. Well, it was some kind of reptilian thing. Another place it's called Nakash. But then Pharaoh's magicians, Janus and Jambra, I think their names is right. They said, yeah, we know how to do that trick. They took their sticks and threw them down, and they turned into snakes also. How did they do that? I mean, was that a magic trick? Was it really a stick that really turned in? Was it demonic? Was it... I don't know. It's beyond my scope of understanding physics, of understanding the nature of the universe. But somehow those guys could do that. And then Moshe's stick ate theirs. And then he came back and he picked it up. And it turned back into a stick. Now, if it was a crocodile, and you grab the tail of the crocodile, I mean, that thing could whip around, but he turned back into a stick. So what is that saying? You could say, oh, well, that was a sign. There's something more going on. And the only way to find out what more is going on is to look at the Hebrew words. The Hebrew words that describe the story, we translate into English, and all we remember is the story. But there's something in those words. Okay, that's just an example. Then there's the 10 plagues. So there's one, an intro, plus 10 plagues. And then there's the last thing that happened, which was after the Israelites escaped, 12 tribes on the Exodus, all of a sudden they get trapped. There's a, just for people maybe don't know this, there's this book you got sitting here. There's a place on the Sinai Peninsula, and this is a close-up view. There's a place in the mountains with a canyon, and then it comes out to what you call a wadi, this big place here, and this is the Red Sea, and Saudi Arabia is on this side, and that was big enough for 3 million people to congregate, and that's where the Israelites ended up being, and the Pharaoh knew that he had them trapped. And right here in this darkened area, there's this pillar of fire and pillar of smoke separating them overnight. And so the people that that made this book, this is Leonard Mueller, the Exodus case, but there's a few other books, they found that there's an underwater land bridge here, and this is where the sea parted, and they found coral-encrusted chariot wheels today with these submarines going down there. Pharaoh's chariots and bones, horse bones, and soldiers and pieces of armor are right there.
It's 8 miles across here between
8
here
miles.
and the land of Midian on that land bridge, and strewn across that is Pharaoh's army.
And that area right before the water, isn't it very constricted?
Yeah, this passing through here is the Red Sea, which is part of the Earth's Great Rift. It's very, very deep, 5,000 feet deep.
It's this area right in here.
And yet, in that,
Well, right up in that corner by the Sinai Peninsula.
and yet in that one spot, is a natural land bridge just a few hundred feet below the surface of the
No,
water.
but I'm talking about the place before they got to the water, didn't it narrow down?
Oh, yeah.
The Wadi
Yeah, this is a
Watir.
narrow canyon
It's called
between
the
the
Wadi.
mountains.
Because I've
Wadi
heard
Watir.
I've heard it spiritually spoken of as likened to a birth canal.
Well, you could say that right there. I mean, this is an aerial photograph of the place that they were gathered, and Pharaoh says, we've got them trapped, and the people were yelling at Yahweh, why didn't you leave us in Egypt? Why did you drag us out here to either get drowned or slaughtered by the Pharaoh, trapped between the mountains? There's nothing we can do. We have no weapons.
I want some leaks.
Huh?
I want some leaks.
Well, that was later. Here's some of the bones, the hip bone of some of Pharaoh's army that they found. And the point that I'm making is that here we are on the verge of 2019. We have at our disposal photographic evidence of things that for the last 3,000 years, people just had to believe on faith. We've got photographic evidence, and it's like, well, you still got to believe, because I know some people don't believe these pictures. We've got the evidence in front of us. What do we do with this information?
Here, I'll do it.
So,
And you were making the point that this last miracle, the destruction of Pharaoh's army, was like a bookend.
so it's number 12.
Number
It's the
12.
12th event.
It's the 12th event, right.
So here's just nature of the study of some of the things that I'm looking at is correlating patterns. So there's 10 plagues, but there was actually a total of 12. Well, there's 10 commandments. Well, there's actually another 2. Love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, soul, and strength. Love your neighbors yourself. So you could look at 12 and then, well, compare them together. And what do they look like? 12 tribes of Israel, 12 constellations. So part of the study, and we can't get into it right now, but let me put it this way. We're trying to keep these things short so people watch them. A lot of people only watch 10, 15 minutes, and then they don't have time. If people want us to elaborate on this, let us know. Check in with Stu's website. Let us know, and we'll do another video, and we'll elaborate some more. But to keep it short, what I'm saying, 2 studies here. 3 actually. What is another way to read the 10 plagues, which I'll do here momentarily. Another aspect, compare the sequence of the 10 plagues directly to the sequence of the 10 commandments and see if there's a correlation going on there. And then with the header and the tail, take the 12 and compare them to the 12 constellations, starting with Betula, ending with Ariel, which is to say, starting with Virgo, ending with Leo, the Virgin and the Lion, which is to say, there was a Sphinx, and people who've done a study on the Egyptian motifs, you've got the Sphinx with the head of a pharaoh or the head of a woman. They've changed them through the years. And the body, the tail end of the lion, was a statement of, if you have a circle, the belt of the zodiac, which is the living creatures, as it were, like a zoo. So, you know, zodiac isn't an evil word. It's where we get the word for zoological. And zoo, which is to say these are the life forms. And Abraham was told to sever the stars, which I believe he designed the constellations. That's a different subject that we've talked about. But what I'm saying is to correlate the pictures of the constellations as if Abraham was instructed to determine them is not the study of astrology. It's not exactly astronomy. It's severing the stars. It's Yahweh's business. And there's a story, John Dilday and myself have collaborated on an extensive study that hopefully one of these days, this year, we've been saying that for a few years, but you know, we'll get together, put together a study. It's fascinating to see what's in there. But to compare them, to analyze the sequence of 12 constellations, the Mazarot, as they're called, to the 10 commandments, to the 10 plagues, the 12 events in Mitzrayim. I've never heard anybody do that, but here, let me just read what I have here. The first statement, interesting to know, he's changed the stick into a serpent, only that's not exactly what it says. If you look at the Hebrew words, it means not nachash. Not, and the word nachash is not only serpent, but it can mean enchantment. So it's almost like I could say, well, the first thing Yahweh tried to set and determine about himself was that this is not sorcery. This is not magic. This is not enchantment. So if you think that his kingdom, his disposition, has anything to do with that entire genre, that whole study, it's not. If you were going to have, say, 12 or 10 statements of identity, why should you start with that? But that's apparently what he started with. This is not enchantment.
That's kind of where Egypt was. I mean, they were focused on enchantment. So maybe he was distinguishing what he's doing from everything that they believed.
So here he said he was going to distinguish his Shem for the entire face of the earth, which means that includes us. So the message of these 10 plagues, 12 events, is a message to us telling us who he is because we've lost track of who he is. And so now this is telling us Okay, where do you look? So we just had the conversation, talked about it at Sukkot. There's a book called Matrix Energetics by Richard Bartlett. There's another book called Healing Codes by Alex Lloyd. The concept of quantum physics, and it's like, gosh, is that fair game? Is the stuff we could be engaged with? And it's like, listen, right out of the gate, just to make it up front. In Yahweh's word, he said, do not engage in sorcery, witchcraft, magic, necromancy, astrology. It's out of bounds. You're wrong even to look in that direction. So it's not that. So for him to take that right out of the gate and make that the first statement, and you can say, well, what has that got to do with him taking a stick and throwing it down? It sure looks like magic. After all, the two magicians of Egypt did the same trick. And it's like, we don't have time to sit there and analyze every one of these. I'm just going to read it for the sake of expediting time here. But what I'm saying is, we could analyze why he said it. I'm just trying to tell you what the words say. And if he says, this is not sorcery, magic, enchantment, I might even, that gets another thing. What I'm saying is that when it gets into quantum physics, shamanism, witch doctoring, medicine man, we really have to know what is of the kingdom of heaven and what is not. And what he said, he gave us instruction. He said, if they speak not according to the Torah and this testimony, there's no light in them. That's a big divide right there. He also said, he's going to give us his instructions. This is Deuteronomy 13. And if there's a guy who has a dream or a guy who gives a prophecy and it does not come true, it's not of him, disregard it. But if it does come true, it might be of Yah. Consider, are they trying to affirm this Torah? Are they trying to encourage you to think on his things and to live according to his ways? Or are they trying to distract you from his ways and lead you on a different path? And if so, then the fact that their dream or their vision came true was a deception sent from Yahweh himself to test us, to see if we will quickly, readily, easily be yanked aside from the path that he gave us to be steadfast and determined to stay on track with. He sends the delusion. He sends the temptation to, what's that? Maybe this is easier, maybe this is tastier, maybe this is more interesting and exciting and a little bit more bells and whistles and it's a little more entertaining. They got better food, they got better holidays, better songs. Where's the path? Why would he do that? Well, that's another story, but the point is, he does that. And if we read Deuteronomy 13,
speak to the rock, but bring your stick.
Oh, man. God. What are you speaking of here? The first time Moshe was told, hit the rock with your stick and water gushed out. The second time he was told, okay, you're not going to hit the rock with your stick, but you're just going to speak to it. And Moses started to leave, and Yahweh said, hey, don't forget to bring it up. Oh, my God, that's right, okay. There's the temptation. And people ticked them off, and Moshe cracked their stick against the rock, and Yahweh says, you just profaned my name amongst my people. You're not going in the land. That's it. It's like, oh, come on. Now, why didn't Yahweh say, Moses, don't bring the stick. Leave it at home. It's like he's playing into the ease of our tripping and falling. Why? And then he yells at us like it's our own fault. No, he's not yelling at us. That's what it feels like. That gets into more of the story. But what I'm trying to say is, the instructions are here, and we got to figure out, what does he mean? What did he say? What are we supposed to do? And right out of the gate, he says, listen, get it straight. This is not magic. Anybody talks about magic, it's not me. Leave it alone. Anybody talk about sorcery? Anybody talk about enchantment? Anybody talk about conjuring the dead, other spirits, other angelic entities? No, I didn't give you guys that. That's somebody else. Leave it alone. It's not me. But he put that into creation. He allowed that to be part of this cosmos. But then he says, that's not your stuff. Kind of like Deuteronomy 14. Here's a whole bunch of animals. He told Noah, coming out of the ark, you can eat anything that has life. And then he told Moshe, if it doesn't have a split hoof and chew the cud, don't eat it. It's not for you. You're to be my set-apart, treasured people. That's not food for you. Other people can eat it, not you. Doesn't mean you're going to go to hell if you have bacon. But he said, don't do it. It will abominate you. Don't eat it. Okay? Anyway, number 1 then was opposite of enchantment. It actually says reverse of serpent. Or it could be read as, the same word for serpent could be read as adventurous, which is to say no pioneer work. No pioneer work. That's another way to read no snake, no enchantment. In other words, don't invent a new religion. The truth has already been established and handed to you. Go back and read what was given to your forefathers. Don't create a new covenant, a new testament, a new religion, a new, what about the bread on the shop? What did I just say? I'm not making any comment. I'm reading what these words mean. The safe trail is already mapped out straight away. You don't have to be a pioneer out there trying to recreate some new ism. Just read what he said. So that's what's in those words for the first thing. Now, the first plague, basically, the word blood is dalet mem, dam, and it also means to be similar. It also means likeness, and it also means silent. That's where we get the word dummy, like crash test dummy. It's similar to a human, but it can't speak, it's silent, and you use it to put in a car and run experiments on to see how people will do. So you build it pretty similar to humans. So anyway, the point is, this is what I came up with translating the first plague. Contrary to similarity, beyond comparison for equitable value of any likeness, unceasing, not silent, unmutable. So what we're saying is, when Yahweh changed the water into blood, okay, he changed water into blood. But what does that mean? What I'm saying is you can read the same words, change the water into blood, not the word, I'd have to go back and look at the exact words, but the point is, not similar, because the word blood is likeness, similarity. So what he was saying is, he is unlike any other deity. Now it just so happens, this is a rather disturbing aspect, throughout the history of what we might call heathen or pagan pantheon of deities, Greek, Roman, Druid, whatever other country on the face of the earth, American, they had three-faced gods. There was this little triplet of Horus, Isis, and Osiris. Oh. And then there was an evil guy too, a fourth entity. And then there was, the Vikings had Odin and Thor and Frida. And the other, I mean, a bunch of them had these little triplets. And Christianity has this Trinity. It's like, but that's holy, that's the Holy Trinity. It's like, hey, listen, I'm not making stuff up. I'm not trying to make commentary. I'm trying to say, when he said it's contrary to similarity, then why is it that what we call holy is very similar to all these other things which are supposed to be flat out heathen? And if he's supposed to be not similar, then how do we get away with very similar? Something's wrong in our understanding. So if he says not similar, no other likeness, completely he is in his own realm, then what I need to do, instead of trying to rationalize the doctrines and the theological constructs that I was taught, I need to just abandon all my presuppositions and take on simply the reality, the paradigm of what he says. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to bash Catholicism, Protestantism, Presbyterianism, or Judaism, or Islam, or Hindu, or I'm not even addressing any of that stuff that they believe. I'm just trying to use that as a reference to what I'm talking about. And when he says, my identity is not like any other identity of any other deities that any other people group has, then it's like, okay, then I'll take that at face value. And if somebody comes up and says, oh, it's like this, which is like this and this and this, and it's like, then I have to ditch it. Just like I have to ditch it if it's sorcery, when he said it's not. That's all we're doing. We're not trying to badmouth anybody. We're just trying to get back on track. Okay, third.
Just to comment on that,
Yes.
I mean, one of the phrases we're supposed to have in our mind all the time is that he is one. Coming from Deuteronomy 4.
The word in Hebrew would be echad. Yahweh echad.
Echad. Very different picture than most of these other deities, the three-faced gods of many of the pagan cultures.
Even though we were talking earlier about Kingdom of the Cults,
Yeah.
and that was one of their litmus tests. If you don't believe that third person of the Trinity, cult.
Okay, so you see, everybody has, as you say, a litmus test is to say, how do we know whether the thing we're considering passes that test? Just for people that know, a litmus test is a piece of paper that you dip it in a substance and it turns either blue or red depending on whether it's acidic or alkaline. That's a litmus test. So what consideration, like this piece of paper, do we take and test it and say, does it come out as a cult or as what we might call kadosh, sanctified, holy, acceptable? And what I'm saying is that he gave us these 10 plagues in Egypt in order to establish his identity. So if we read it in Hebrew, we are applying as a litmus test, is it Yod-He-Vav-He, or is it a faker, a deceiver who's trying to slip in and distract us, like Deuteronomy 13 said. We're not trying to invent any kind of dogma. We're trying to appreciate that he already gave us the litmus test, and now we're trying to rationally apply it in our own day and in our own conscious parameters.
Exactly.
So the second plague, which is the third matter here, it's the word for frog, zapharda. And I can elaborate, but let me get on right to the point. Enriched with knowledge, repository of all that is knowable, with exclusive access as the source or the wellhead. So what Yahweh is saying by sending the plague of frogs, and I'd have to elaborate why I come up with this, but what he's saying is everybody else has to figure things out. He's the guy that invented it and put it there that they're trying to figure out. Science, literally what the word science means is trying to determine what it is you're looking at. I see something, but I don't know what that is. And then you're trying to wrap your mind and focus your eyeballs and try to analyze it and determine what it's composed of. And there's an interesting story. Really, just this is so fascinating. I got this, what? Gosh, are we almost out of time?
You're 43 minutes. I warned you about the battery power.
Okay, we're going to be done here in 15. I'll have to hurry up. The point is this. It was in National Geographic, the thing about the Vikings. Their chief god was Odin, the god of war. And not to elaborate on his Shem, but they had one statement in this National Geographic book. They said the chief god of the Vikings, this fierce monster god of war, knew he had a lack. There was a void in his capacity. And he tortured himself, how, I don't know, it doesn't matter, on some tree suspended between heaven and earth. Almost looks like the crucifixion of the Jesus Christ figure. Tortured himself 40 days in order to try to get something. What was it? The knowledge of what the runes meant. In other words, here you have the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. And here you have the Mishkan pattern, the pictographs, the modern and cursive Hebrew, the petroglyphs, the Greek and the English, all correlated. And this is what they mean. This is what the letters mean. And Odin was trying to figure this out. And he was willing to torture himself for 40 days to figure this. And I dare say he didn't figure it out, because this is the identity of Yod-He-Vav-He. Himself, the identity of Yahweh, is wrapped up in the pictures of the Mishkan pattern, which is the core fundamental essence, the skeleton, as it were, of the Hebrew alphabet. And there's no way Odin, some pretender, is going to figure that out. And the Vikings knew it because they didn't know what they mean. But Yahweh is the letters. The letters describe his character, nature, identity, his Shem. The Hebrew letters are his Shem. So when we study Hebrew, we're studying Ehyeh, Yahuwah, Yahusha. And the Brit, the covenant with his people, his Segula treasure, Israel. You think Odin's going to figure that out by torturing himself on some tree suspended between heaven and earth for 40 days? It's an incredible concept. And here we have handed to us the greatest treasure in all the world. And if we study it and become like him, we become the greatest treasure in all the world, which is his treasure, his Segula. Malachi 3:16 talks about that.
So by filling Egypt with frogs, was he telling Pharaoh that here before you is the opportunity to know, to have knowledge, to understand me, who I am. You can accept it or reject it. You can harden your heart, or you can understand.
There you go. But you see, if we just read, I said a bunch of frogs, we missed that message for the sake of the story of all the frogs. That's the beauty of trying to read into the Hebrew what it is that's actually happening by looking at these 10 plagues. He was telling not just Pharaoh, but he was telling us, regard me, because this is the source, the fountainhead of all knowledge. All that is knowable is right in here. Okay, next one. It means has the ability to nullify or darken the guidance system.
This is the gnats.
Yikes. Let me find back where I wrote this stuff down in order. Okay. How do you like that? I didn't even write down in a reasonable order. Okay. The first one was throwing the staff, the next one was the river of blood, next one frogs, next one was lice or vermin.
Okay.
Now, the next one after that was a swarm, but it doesn't say flies and it doesn't say gnats. That's the English translation. So this one is lice or vermin. Let me just back up a little bit. On the 10 Commandments, the first statement was, he says, Anoki Yahuwah. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. I took you out of the house of Egypt, out of the house of bondage and slavery. He's establishing his identity. In the next one, basically, he's this one here regarding the lice and the vermin lines up with the commandment to not take his name in vain. Okay, so the significance of making this correlation is that this says has the ability, what I translate here, has the ability to nullify or darken the guidance system. What does that mean? It seems like it has something to do with altering DNA, genetically modified, turning fruitfulness into cancer. It has to do with fertility, seed, DNA. Well, if he says don't take his name in vain, and his name is the Shem Zakar, that was in Exodus 3 at the burning bush, then there's something correlating the 10 Commandments of his identity and how to walk in his ways to what we have done. Not only what the Egyptians have done, but what we have done in our culture. The Greco-Roman, European, American rule of the world at this point in time has done and is doing the same stuff that Egypt was doing. So we might sit there and say, gosh, this is a warning to us. But what I'm saying is that when you compare, don't make any likeness, what has that got to do with the previous one about the source of all knowledge? In their attempts to define reality, they meaning the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, every culture, even us, you look at the rotunda, the citadel of the U.S. Capitol, and it's got all these Greek and Roman deities painted up there. It's like we are no better than anybody else. We're just as filthy, if not more, because we should know better. We're running out of time. We've just got moments here. The point is, when you correlate to the 10 Commandments, it has to do with saying, if we make likenesses of other things, we are eliminating knowledge. If we turn to Yahuwah and recognize Him as being our Elohim, that's the source, the beginning of all knowledge, to take His name in vain is the same thing as nullifying our fruitfulness. The next one, sends confusion as a missile-like projection, dispatching disinformation to scramble comprehension. Demonic interventions must appease the prevailing forces, powers unknown causing disturbances. It's like, what is that all about? It has to do with this day. By losing the Shabbat, we, just like in the days before Noah, they mixed with, well, they begat the Nephilim that says, angels and men, and losing the sovereignty that He gave us. When we lose the Shabbat, we lose the sovereignty. That was what the fourth plague. We're out of time. We got to quit.
You only got a couple minutes of battery
We've only got
life.
2
You can
minutes.
quit at any
It's like,
time.
okay,
We can do a part two. I mean, it's
we'll
an
do part
interesting
two. We'll
attack.
just plug in and go.
Let me do a
longer.
quick, yeah, we'll do a part two, but let me pan around the, they just opened up this room to the guests and everything. Just want people to see it. This is
the inn at Knowles Hill
oh yeah.
in Sonora.
If you can make it here, you
California.
gotta see it.
No, you don't got to see it. You got to experience it.
yeah,
You gotta
it's an
you gotta-
experience.
You got to stay for a weekend or a day or a night, and wonderful bed and breakfast. Pan up and you'll get the rifle.
Get the rifle, Eric. Right there.
Get the point?
Got the bayonet, yeah. I'll do a little lower pan. You can. Too bad this thing doesn't zoom out anymore, but it's just full of treasures. A couple right there, my best buds. And they made that into a coffee bar for the guests. Oh boy, we're on vapors now. All right, till the next video. Shalom.
Shalom.